My name is Jocelyn. I am a psychodynamic, psychotherapeutic psychotherapist in private practice. I'm also a clinical supervisor, and I work on the DMT and 5-MeO DMT for depression clinical trials in the UK. Alongside this, I also co-facilitate the Brighton Psychedelics integration circles, and I am a space holder and also study with the IPT, the Institute of Psychedelic Therapy. And I'm joined here today with my dear friend and colleague, Hannah.
Hello, my name is Hannah Raine-Smith. I'm a psychotherapist and independent researcher working in private practice, based in Devon, but actually pretty much all online nowadays. I'm just really grateful to be here. Just wanted to say that. That's not on the script, but I just wanted to say grateful to be given the opportunity to talk about something we're really passionate about with someone who I'm really close with now through doing this research. So it's cool, really cool. I developed an interest in complex PTSD and psychedelics on my undergrad in psychotherapeutic counselling, and went on to study cognitive neuroscience at Cardiff, where I was looking at psychedelics just in the PG dip that I was doing. I then kind of discovered EMDR and found it had loads of parallels with psychedelics, and the impact it can have in therapy just seemed so dramatically different to kind of talking therapy that I'd previously been doing in the domestic violence charities I was working in. So I went and did an MSc at Worcester in EMDR, and all of this training kind of informs the psychedelic assisted therapy work that I'm doing in my private practice currently, and our research, obviously, as well. Yeah. Cool.
So we've got a fairly short slot to fit in quite a lot of information, and so where we can, we'll talk to you where we want to really kind of honour the integrity of the work that we've done. We will be reading as well, and not to lie, we haven't fully learnt it. So to begin with, the big question really would help if I had the clicker. Yes, okay. So the big question is, why psychedelic assisted EMDR therapy? And so primarily, the first priority for us is all around optimization. So how can we enhance the therapeutic value of every single psychedelic dose so that we can minimize the risks and optimize the benefits?
So the trauma-informed practice, given that the exposure to childhood adversity has an impact on adult mental health, we advocate for trauma-informed practice that is rigorously applied as a psychedelic-assisted psychotherapy.
Alongside this, we hope to be an inclusive treatment. We know that clinical populations with complex presentations and those with undiagnosed sensitivities tend to be ruled out, and we want to accommodate them within the psychedelic assisted therapy paradigm.
Widening participation. We recognise a need to widen participation, making psychedelic therapy a more inclusive treatment option. EMDR is and will remain in the public domain for use by everyone. Yeah.
And so a big question then, what does fully integrated mean, or what does integration mean? We talk about integration therapy, but what do we actually mean? What does to be integrated look like? And so we see that integration requires the emotional, the cognitive, the behavioural and the somatic response. And we believe that EMDR therapy attends to all of these.
Objective. We see that integrated psychedelic content needs to be systematically, objectively and quantifiably measured in order for it to be adopted into commissioned healthcare settings.
So we see that integration is a lifelong process, and that if we are able to use the memory networks as a way of integrating psychedelic content, then we can do so over the full lifespan. So not just in the present in terms of psychedelic experience, but also in the past and the future as well. And we can liken this to a Grothian coex or a Jungian complex, or if you're into schema theory and that's your thing, in EMDR we call it a memory network.
Ethical delivery. We see a need to support, respond to, reduce or eliminate somatic responses skillfully and ethically without the need for body work or touch.
In addition to this, consistency. We are looking to improve therapeutic consistency. We see this as an imperative if we are going to be offering psychedelic assisted therapy at scale.
Stabilization, key part of EMDR, the protocol of EMDR. We work psychologically with destabilized individuals rather than signposting them to medicalized interventions for support.
An important one, diversity. We are an evidence-based intervention, which means that as a kind of a medically orientated treatment and an evidence-based orientated treatment, we hope to be able to support people irrespective of age, ethnicity, cultural variance, etc.
Sustainability. PA-EMDR therapy protocols supports the greener NHS's sustainable healthcare initiatives, including making every intervention count and getting it right the first time. So we use an integrative, trauma-informed theory of memory consolidation, the adaptive information processing model, to guide our psychedelic assisted therapy interventions. The AIP model posits that activation of the sympathetic nervous system in response to extreme stress interrupts the encoding of memories in an attempt to maintain homeostasis. This results in the corresponding sensory information being stored in a state-specific form that is dissociated from the main memory networks. This information can be reactivated by stressors in the present and is conceptualized as being responsible for a wide range of psychopathologies. From an adaptive information processing perspective, the transient hyperplastic state caused by serotonergic psychedelics appears to facilitate the emergence of maladaptively encoded trauma memories. These can be spontaneously integrated, but often require psychotherapeutic interventions to achieve this. We suggest that the current non-directive integration techniques that do not adequately facilitate integration of psychedelic material, and that the trauma-informed approach of EMDR is well aligned to do this.
So we've kind of done the why and the what, and now we're going to show you the how. So we have been blessed by a collaboration that has come about with an author and scholar, Scott Hill, and we'd like to thank him for sharing his personal content for the purposes of education and training others. As many of you will know, Scott has written about this book, which was in Roberto's presentation earlier on this afternoon, or this morning. Time lapses. His book, Confrontation with the Unconscious, which is a Jungian depth psychology and psychedelic experience. Scott includes, along with other case materials, some episodes from his own challenging LSD experiences in 1967. Scott, who is now 75, he keeps telling me off for saying he's 76, but
oh, right.
He is 75. He participated in 6 sessions of EMDR. One of those was a preparatory session, and then there were 5 reprocessing sessions. And herein we will demonstrate how the maladaptively stored contents affects his memory networks, and how the impact of this has presented across his lifetime. So this case material illustrates the potential of EMDR to fully integrate historic psychedelic content and indicates how these results generalize out into improved levels of well-being.
And just a trigger warning for everyone. This footage contains content including suicide, ecological grief, and encounters with the shadow material, which some viewers may find upsetting.
Okay, so just to unpack a little bit, just to sort of signpost what you may be looking at before we play the content, and hopefully it will play with impeccable, yes, we've got a thumbs up from the tech, thank you. So with Psychedelic Assisted EMDR, we start by establishing the target from the difficult psychedelic experience. And this really just serves as an entry point or a portal into the main memory network. And the target is activated by connecting with the detail of that memory. So we ask the client and collaborate with the client to identify the image, the thought, emotion, and sensation that represents really what is the most emotionally salient aspect of that content. And we'll just kind of show you a brief excerpt of what that looks like, hopefully.
You know, there's that 4 difficult experiences. And I can imagine going back to the first one, the point where I thought I'd come into the wrong world, as a start. and then going to the second one, where I felt like I was being pulled into the ocean and was going to die.
Yeah.
And then the third one would have been when I was on the beach with my brother and his friends, and I thought, okay, I'm back now. I've got to end my life in this world.
Yeah.
And the fourth one being when I thought I was being brought back again. We want to start with the first of those?
Yeah, I mean, from a processing perspective, we either request the first or the worst. So going with the first and that sense of coming back into the wrong world, is that kind of the first and the worst, or is it the
Good question. Wow. Well, I think the worst, where I was just most terrified, was the second one, where I was on the beach with my friends, and I thought I was being pulled into the ocean to die. I mean, I begged them. I begged them to. This is on a beach, and above the beach are dunes.
Yeah. And
my friend was waiting for me at the top where we had left him to go down to the beach.
Yeah.
And I just begged them to take me back. And I crawled up the dunes, literally, with my hands and knees. I mean, so as far as the worst, that was probably the worst, even worse than when I decided I had to go to the bridge.
On the next slide, we demonstrate how we use the Somatic Bridge technique that EMDR has co-opted from hypnoanalytic therapy to identify the corresponding unconscious material that was reactivated during the psychedelic experience.
Touching back into that memory of being 19 on the beach with your friends, that image of them being begged to take you back up the sand dunes, crawling, the sense of being pulled into the water, that fear. Where do you feel that in your body?
Definitely in my chest and my abdomen.
And this time, on a scale of 0 to 10, how disturbing does that feel to you? 0 is neutral and 10 is the highest you can imagine.
6 to 7, 6,
Okay.
7.
Yeah. So just staying with that image, that fear, where you feel it in your chest, your abdomen. Drop back in time. Go back as far as you can. And tell me the very first place that you land. Don't edit or judge, the very first place.
Back in place and time in my life?
That's correct, yeah.
Well, the first thing I imagine is being a little boy, but I don't have any specific image.
No problem. Can you give me an age, a sense of how old you are?
Let's say 3.
Yeah. Just look around you. Where are you?
Well, let's take me back to the kitchen where the accident happened.
And in that image, can you give me the emotion?
I'm imagining this now.
Yeah, that's fine. Stay with the imaginal. What's the emotion?
I'm feeling the same emotion of anxiety and fear, but I don't know if I've pulled the cord on the coffee percolator or not.
Hey, don't edit or judge. It's a network. Just go with it. So just staying with the anxiety, the fear. Where do you feel that in your body?
In my stomach, in my chest.
You're doing really well. So just staying with that sensation in your stomach, your chest, that image in the kitchen. And when you've got a good sense of that in your body, in your own time, just start tapping on that, just as we did before.
Right here?
So traditional EMDR uses eye movements as bilateral stimulation. Bilateral stimulation of the brain, or BLS, can be activated with tactile, auditory, or visual stimulation. In this demonstration, I use tapping. Once the most emotionally salient material is activated, we then add bilateral stimulation to facilitate interhemispheric activation of the brain, which supports reprocessing of the memory network starting at the age of 2. And this is likened to kind of the REM state, sleep and dreaming, or entropic brain theory. So hopefully.
And I'm in the kitchen. I'm also having other memories, actually images that other images, memories around the accident.
Just follow those, go with them.
Should I speak and describe them?
In your own time.
I have one image that I think comes from something my mother told me, because I don't think it's a memory, but it's a strong image. My mother told me that when I was in the hospital, perhaps after going through the emergency care, I was lying on the bed, and I insisted that she lie in the bed with me, so that I was lying between her and the wall. So I had the wall to my back, and I had her to my front side, and I insisted that she be there.
Notice that.
In the next slide, we can see Scott connecting with and integrating somatic effect that's dysfunctionally stored in the memory networks. This is facilitated by the bilateral stimulation of the brain. Here, we invite you to pay special attention to see, as is so often the case, it's the absence of an attachment figure to calm the nervous system that exacerbates the impact of the traumatic experience. With what Scott describes as a narcissistic, depressed mother and an emotionally absent workaholic father, he learned very early on to take care of himself, to do it all alone, which of course carried through to how he dealt with his traumatic LSD trips for decades.
That's it. That's it. Stay with it. Stay with it. Just feel it. That's it. That's it. You're doing really well. That's it.
So much to go through.
Yeah, notice that.
You did it all alone.
Yeah.
There was a wonderful lecture yesterday on somatic experiencing, and in that they kind of teased through the kind of the body memory, and we found throughout processing that as Scott kind of hunched over, that was linked to his fear of looking up because of the coffee percolator and his third-degree burns that he had sustained. And so when he was really processing the most emotionally intense aspects of the experience, the body memory was kind of playing through, and you saw a little bit of that then. So eventually, once the pathologically stored memory is reprocessed, adaptive information begins to emerge. As the somatic effect reduces, this generalizes to the emotional and cognitive content too, and this links to the adaptive thoughts and into the other related memories in that network, schema, coex. So that grounds all of the fragmented parts into a sense of safety here in the present, which in turn has a calming effect on the nervous system. What I'd like you to pay attention to in this next clip in terms of somatic reenactment is what happens during the processing. So if you can notice that at times the bilateral stimulation tapping turns into a kind of like a rubbing motion on the shoulders and the upper chest. And in a later processing session, Scott pieced together that these movements were in fact another body memory, one of him receiving care from his mother after the burns, where she rubbed cream into his scar tissue.
The thing that comes to mind is you made it, didn't you?
Yeah, notice that.
You remember, I don't know if you remember, but during the integration session after Feldon, I told a story that when I got on the train in the Stockholm airport, coming back from Felden, I got on the train, which is the last leg of the trip. And there'd been so much uncertainty, you know, with the connections and everything, the train and all the connections I had to make and the catheter problems. Mm-hmm. So I stepped on the train. I said to myself, I fucking made it.
Notice that.
I fucking made it.
Yeah.
I was so happy. And, you know, I was so happy.
Yeah.
I was just so happy. And so I'm telling myself as a little boy, you fucking made it.
Yeah. Notice that. Yeah. Feel that.
You fucking made it.
Yeah.
I wouldn't probably say it quite that way. Little boy. You made it, didn't you?
Yeah, notice that. And also let the little boy in the hospital bed know that he fucking made it. and the 19-year-old on the beach, let him know that you fucking made it. Gathering up all those little parts and reassuring them.
Yeah, and not to mention the guy who drove to the bridge. We made it.
Yeah.
You made it that time, and you made it. I didn't tell the story about, I think I told you about what I did, how I tried to kill myself, and I went onto the bridge and I couldn't jump and I drove back, but I didn't tell the story about how I got stopped by the sheriff on the way back, driving back. I got pulled over.
Yeah.
And it's a hell of a story. And they got me out of the car and they questioned me and they searched the car. They asked me if I was on LSD. I, of course, denied it. Yeah. They let me go. I got back into the car. And I was so stoned I couldn't read my ID cards. I was looking at one card and I was throwing them in the back seat until I could find the right card.
Yeah.
And I gave him a fake ID. And I said, oh, that's the fake driver's license we used to get in the casinos.
Yeah.
And then I gave him the real ID. So I was so fucking stoned. And they let me go.
Yeah, notice that. And those words, I fucking made it.
You fucking made it.
Yeah, notice that.
And I went back. I drove back to Carmel. I sit in the car. I don't think I told this story. I sat in the car and I found the razor blades that my brother used to divide up the tabs of LSD.
Yeah.
And I rubbed the razor blade over my wrist.
Yeah. Notice that.
I'm thinking I would do it this way. And I looked out the window and I saw a car drive by. And it was the car I was sitting in. It was the same car. It was a hallucination. Yeah. My father and my mother were driving and they were looking straight ahead. My brother was sitting in the back seat and he leaned forward and he looked out the back window straight at me. And the car kept driving and turned the corner left and drove down to the main street of Carmel. And I put the razor blade away and I walked down the street where the car had driven. And I found my brother and his friends standing on the other side of the street. You fucking made it.
Yeah, notice that. Feel that.
And I went to the friend's house where we spent the night. And I went into the bedroom where my brother and I were going to spend the night. And I went into the bathroom and took out the razor blade. But I put it away and I went out in the bedroom. I said to my brother, I think I'm thinking of killing myself. And he was freaked out. He was still on acid too, and he called our mutual friend, and the mutual friend came in and said, and he talked me out of it very sweetly.
Yeah.
And I went to bed, and we woke up and we went out to the car. And in the car, there was a sheriff's hat in the back seat. Believe it or not, he left his hat in there looking for drugs. And you fucking made it.
Notice that, feel that.
I think what hits me now is just how much good fortune I've had in my life.
Yeah.
Here you can see the adaptive information naturally emerging as he connects with the positive thought, I fucking made it. He then continues through that memory network from childhood to adolescent into the present and the future. In EMDR, this is described as a three-pronged approach. All the footage you've seen so far has been from the very first processing session. Unfortunately, you don't have sufficient time to share the material from the other 4 sessions with you now. But for context, we completed the childhood content, which then generalized and changed his perspective on all later material in that network. Once the root memory from childhood is reprocessed, the positive cognition I survived naturally emerged. This spontaneously generalized into the LSD experience. Then, with reprocessing, this shifted his perspective regarding his wife's recent Alzheimer's diagnosis. This further generalized to further fears relating to climate change. In the final clip, we demonstrate the reassessment of the traumatic material from the past, present, and future. In EMDR, the material being integrated is assessed using the body scan and subjective units of distress scale to monitor and process any remaining somatic response to the trauma.
We're going to hold the image of you being 2, of 19, of present, of future. Getting a sense of all of that now. And those words, we will survive what we need to go through. Scanning down through your whole body. Just let me know what you get now.
I don't generally like the word happiness, but I feel a sense of goodness and peace in my body right now.
Yeah.
So we are independent researchers. We're all about the data as best as we can be. So we took a subjective unit of distress, which is a self-rated score at the start of processing. And for the LSD experience, Scott scored himself in terms of the somatic effect, a 7 out of 10 for levels of disturbance. As you can see, after EMDR therapy, that was a 0 in terms of the body affect. And that was in the content which was from the LSD experience from the 2-year-old, as well as in the present. And given that while we were conducting the reprocessing sessions, Scott and his wife received news of a diagnosis of Alzheimer's. So this was a very very time for them both, and also in the future with regards to the same. I'm not safe. I died, and that kind of was the future projection in terms of climate change, and his kind of what sits behind his climate activism now. And so the schema kind of generalized out into the past, present, and future strands, the 3-pronged approach. Alongside this, also conducted some psychometrics, as you can see, the GAD-7, which is a measure of anxiety, self-rated score at the start, at the outset. I mean, these are pretty standardized psychometric measures. At the outset, it started as 15, and the kind of depression rating score, the PHQ-9, was a 3. After EMDR therapy, which was it was a short-term intervention, right? And over the 5 sessions, he had also received this difficult information. So it was down to a 3 for anxiety and a 2 for PHQ-9. But as you can see, 2 months later, with that information fully integrated and kind of more solidly in his life, once again, the GAD was down to a 0, and we will continue to follow up with Scott's psychometrics so that we can provide longitudinal assessment of the impact of psychedelic assisted EMDR therapy.
That's just some like qualitative feedback, which I haven't got time to read out now, but you guys can read it.
We've got the break.
Well, if you're happy to stay around for a moment longer, this is our final slides. So.
Yeah, so I've been doing quite well, with the exception of 2 off days since my last psychometric assessment. I've been feeling clear and balanced with a generally constructive state of mind. This is especially gratifying given the most recent challenges with my wife's health. The 2 days that were exceptions to my generally good state of mind were dominated by moderate feelings of being out of sorts, no significant depression. I think the positive states I'm experiencing are a consequence of our EMDR sessions.
As you know, it is a break, but just to let you know, we are going to be releasing a book, Psychedelic Assisted EMDR Therapy, a memory consolidation approach to psychedelic healing in 2024 with our collaborators Routledge. We also continue to offer EMDR therapy supervision, and we hope at some point in the not too distant future to be offering a practitioner training as well. So you can register your interest at our website. If you've got any we've got some publications, recent publications if you'd like a hard copy. And if you've got any questions, please do feel free to ask. Is that okay? You can ask.
Or at the party. Yeah.